All right, so as we have teased over the better part of a week or so, and to help us wrap up our AFC North divisional preview, perhaps the most interesting team, the most intriguing team within the division, looking outward, which is saying something from the Cincinnati Bengals just coming off a Super Bowl berth, but the Cleveland Browns have a lot of things going on. They are a little bit of a mystery to some, and to help us unravel that mystery, we have Mr. Jeff Lloyd of the Locked On Browns podcast, part of that great network. Jeff, how you doing, man? Thanks for making the time and hanging out with us.
We're good. And thanks, John. Thanks, Anthony, for having me here. It's been weird, obviously, here the way it's been constructed now for the last 2 months. I mean, as much as any podcast, you literally just want to talk about your team and the changes that have been made and what you're looking forward to. I think most Browns fans, and I myself included, my co-host Garrett Bush, it feels like we're kind of in it's like, all right, do we have a certain legal point we need to speak about in today's episode? Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's the elephant in the room. And, hopefully maybe Tuesday or sometime this week, we'll start to get some resolution to what exactly. And I think everybody kind of knows nobody's blind. Everybody knows the situation. But I think it's just the point now where everybody would like to find out what the resolution is. What kind of time is Deshaun Watson going to miss? And this will be where we can now take our focus as far as covering this team.
Yeah, we've talked about it on our show in a couple of different types of episodes, whether it's our kind of whip around the league for some headline stuff, and obviously just kind of talking about things on our more, our Wednesday night show and whatnot. It's, you kind of, it is the elephant in the room. You got to talk about it a little bit, I guess, with however much or little detail, I guess, you want to give with certain things going on. But obviously your gut feeling on what this is looking like with Deshaun Watson, at least for this year. I mean, you heard things, maybe it's 6 games, maybe it's 8 games. And now over the past few days and late last week, you were talking about, hearing about a substantial amount of time, potentially far more than that he could miss. I mean, what's your gut feeling? What's reading the tea leaves here? What is that looking like?
I don't think he's going to miss the entire 2022 season. I just don't. The way this is going to work on the NFL Players Association side is, look, they're going to say, yes, we understand he got paid last year, but he didn't play last year. So they're going to try to say and try to work for hey, there's some time served here. The NFL Players Association, and this is where it's going to be interesting because J.C. Tretter, the former Cleveland Browns center, is now literally going to go stand there and bat for the current Cleveland Browns quarterback, who he essentially has, minimal relationship with, other than, hey, we both play in the NFL. We know each other from that regards. You look at, Dan Snyder. How is an owner like Dan Snyder never been asked to walk away for a while? And this is things that the Players Association is going to bring up. I think the Players Association is going to go in this, hey, we understand that there is a suspension coming. But I think they are going to fight tooth and nail to understand that it shouldn't be to the point of an entire season, because there have been incidents like this in the NFL and, with some ownership, and the precedent wasn't set there. So why all of a sudden does, Deshaun Watson, and look, this isn't a question for any of us thinking about, judging these acts. It's not. It's about what the league views, how the league does business. And I think at the end of the day, the NFL would rather not see Deshaun Watson sit for a calendar year. The NFL is all about, dollar signs, and, Deshaun Watson being the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, making the AFC North a better division. The AFC, obviously, there are so many eyes on the AFC and the potential of what this conference can do in the NFL with this season. I just don't see a way it's going to be an entire season. If you tell me it's going to be half, you tell me it may be 10, I think that can happen. I just don't see a way it's going to be all 17.
So I think it's fascinating, like the process of how like Watson came to be in Cleveland, because it was like the final 4 teams, and then there was another team along with Cleveland I think offered him, or would have offered him, the contract that he accepted. But at the end of the day, like there was a report from The Athletic that stated like he really hit it off with Stefanski, the front office, and he really liked the direction of where the roster is going. So in the scenario that Watson is suspended, let's say like 6 to 8 games, that's 6 to 8 weeks where presumably Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback. And how do you feel about this iteration of the roster compared to last year, potentially, having to play with a middling quarterback or a quarterback that's not really going to enhance the team? Because unfortunately, that's what the Browns had to deal with last year when Baker Mayfield was hurt and he just wasn't himself. And they were still in the playoff race for basically the entire season.
Well, the first thing you would look at is, and this is where I think Baker had his difficulties last year. And it's a little bit different for Baker Mayfield last year being the quarterback of this team, and maybe Jacoby Brissett having to do it for 6, 8, maybe 10 games this year. You can't tell a player of Baker Mayfield's ilk, where he was drafted number 1 overall, don't lose the game. You just don't speak that way to a guy who was a number 1 overall pick. Jacoby Brissett, it's a whole different ball of wax, obviously. The one thing to say to Jacoby Brissett is, look at what we have on defense. 9 games last year, we held opponents to 16 points or less. So turnovers, it's crucial. We cannot have them. Even points that we left on the field last year. We went out, we drafted who we think was the best kicker in this draft. Just get the ball down the field, get us inside the 30. Obviously, we're hoping to score touchdowns, but we'll be okay with field goals. Just keep getting us positive drives. Jacoby Brissett, there was a stretch for the Indianapolis Colts where there was a time where it was 18 touchdowns and 4 interceptions over a certain amount of period. So he's capable of just moving the offense. Is he going to do anything close to what Deshaun Watson they think he's going to do? No. Are you going to game plan a lot different? Are you going to call plays a lot different? I think another huge factor in all of this is Kareem Hunt didn't play 9 games last season for the Cleveland Browns. If Kareem Hunt plays those 9 games, I think the Browns do backdoor their way into the playoffs last year. He's such a valuable piece to this team as a receiver, as a runner. Still here, you still have Nick Chubb. Not many changes on the offensive line. The wide receiver room, I think you've gotten to the point with the wide receiver room where it's the correct word, maybe it's drama-free, perhaps, and even Jarvis Landry, to his own fault, a lot of times he was the story when he didn't necessarily be the story. Amari Cooper is a much more unassuming guy, and let's put it this way, over the last couple of years of Odell Beckham Jr., of Jarvis Landry, of Amari Cooper, who was the best receiver on the field? It's a hand down. It's a no-brainer. It was Amari Cooper. Simple in that regards. So these are just things. But I really think that this is a team with the way they are built on the offensive line, with their running game, and with what this defense could be. Look, they are already 9 deep in the secondary before they even opened camp. If you were a guy going to camp as a defensive back for the Cleveland Browns, you were hoping maybe you were the 10th defensive back. They are deep at linebacker. They're deep at defensive end. All the premium positions on the defensive side of the ball. This team is built defensively that they can sustain it. First 4 games are very winnable, regardless of who the quarterback of this team is. Then you get into that stretch after that first 4 where, there's teams, Chargers, Patriots, that the Browns had issues with last year. But these games now will be in Cleveland this year. You have a lot of defensive players who have seen both of these teams previously. So maybe so much not new when you're going to go play these teams. This team is built to contend. They're built to maybe challenge for the division with Deshaun Watson, but they are built to contend either way for a wild card spot, regardless of who the quarterback is for maybe the first 10 games.
Talking with Jeff Lloyd of the Locked On Browns podcast, does a great job on that podcast, as do the many, many hosts in that network. Happy to be chatting about the Cleveland Browns and previewing the finale of the AFC North here. I'm going to ask, I want to talk about the receivers. I want to talk about the draft class. I want to talk about all kinds of different things if you've got time, but since I'm the resident dummy here, I'm going to ask the dumb question. Is there any reality that exists wherein Baker Mayfield is still a Brown this next year, maybe plays snaps for him this year, if Deshaun Watson gets, a mega suspension handed to him, if they're all, obviously the trade partners have dwindled since after the draft and free agency and all that kind of stuff. I mean, is there any kind of scenario that you could foresee where Baker Mayfield is a Brown this year, takes snaps for him, anything like that?
I think the easiest way to put this was, I think the 3 of us had the same odds of pulling the Mega Millions ticket, tomorrow. Look, it's not a way it works. I mean, for all that went on and, Baker's reaction and everybody, I can't believe he's reacting this way. Well, you tell somebody basically you're not good enough. We think we can do better. And then Baker Mayfield saying, well, then trade me. Well, who wouldn't? I mean, who would? You basically told the guy to his face, here's a list of quarterbacks that we think are better than you. We're going to do everything we can to acquire them, and we'll figure out what our relationship is with you. I mean, it's that. I mean, there's no more over than that, and I kind of equate it to, the old line of dating when somebody suggests to the other one, maybe we should see other people, which means the person who suggested it either already has phone numbers or has already started seeing other people. It's over. It's a finality. That's the end of it. Why has it gone on this long? Baker Mayfield not being able to do anything this entire time. How, if you're a team like the Carolina Panthers or Seattle Seahawks, do you bring in Baker Mayfield injured, not going to do anything through OTAs, but meanwhile you have young guys working, saying, look, we got faith in you. We want to see what you can do. But none of it matters because there's our quarterback, even though we can't do anything right now. I mean, look, it is as over can be. And for me, it's difficult because, the fact that the Browns are even a talking point right now is due a lot to what Baker Mayfield did in his play. Maybe more in 2018, certainly more in 2020. But as far as what he did to take this franchise from being the absolute laughingstock of the NFL and make them a relevant franchise. So, I understand, and I'm not going to say in any way they upgraded their play at the quarterback position by bringing in Deshaun Watson. I'm not a fool, but there is some difficulty, and nobody wants to basically be told, we think you're good, but you're not good enough. And that's essentially what this came down to.
I think it's a very interesting dynamic from a Bengals fan's perspective because I think there's a little bit of resentment about Baker because of how successful he's been against the Bengals specifically, yeah. But also it's like you see him against the 30 other teams and it's almost like it's a completely different person. From your perspective, like the last 3 years where Baker's 6-0 or whatever his record is against the Bengals, how was breaking that down compared to the other 90% of the Baker Mayfield games and just the Brown games that you've seen in general? Because it's not just Baker, it's the entire team that really pops off against this team right now.
Well, I mean, in 2018, this was a team that played extremely well. I mean, you went from 0-16 to 7-8-1. That is solid play. I mean, that is a major turnaround for any team to go 0-16 to 7-8-1. 2020, and the weirdest thing about 2020 was, I mean, you were talking at a time where there was no OTAs. Training camp due to COVID was so different. When the Browns went out week 1, went to Baltimore, and it went very, very poorly. But then you came back that Thursday night. The Bengals, their new franchise quarterback, and Browns had a day. And there was the good of Baker Mayfield. There was the bad of Baker Mayfield. And I think as much as you guys are maybe viewing it versus the Bengals, I think it's maybe more of, seasons. 2018, he was fantastic. 2020, he was really, really good to the point where there were a lot of metrics. Whatever one you chose to use, Baker Mayfield played like a top 10 quarterback within the league. Did he do himself any favors last year playing injured? Certainly not. Is Baker always the kind of guy that, oh man, I threw an interception, and he would find a way to score 13 points on the next drive when everybody knows that's, obviously inconceivable and there's no way to do it, but he would try to outplay what even he could do. Those are situations he certainly got himself into. But against the Bengals, I mean, this is, one thing, and I even said it, as, last year as your guys' playoff run went on, and it was, well, how are, now I guess we're measuring ourselves against the Cincinnati Bengals. Well, no, I mean, they match up really well. That's one team within the AFC North they don't really seem to have an issue with. They match up very well with the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll see if it holds true for the future here. But, whether it was, pass rush, whether it was, the Bengals having a hard time with the Browns running game, or Baker Mayfield that week in Cincinnati last year, because that was one of the tough things. It was like, well, if you wanted to play the he's a hurt card, well, he's hurt, there were a couple of games. The Chargers game was one last year. Certainly the Bengals game on the road against you last year. It was like, well, we can't use the he's hurt excuse every week because there's weeks where he's played really well, and I'm sure he was just as in much pain. I'm sure the injury was still there. It was like he wasn't magically healed for 3.5 hours to go out and play the game. So that's what made it really, really, difficult as far as trying to judge exactly the way he played last year. And then once the team got up against it, he just tried to put everything on him. Sometimes there were drops. Okay, so he would try to make up for it by making up for it. He would make up for it with a couple of poor passes that led to even more interceptions. Just, basically something went down a bad road, and he certainly didn't help the team from it getting any better. It just went further and further down the road.
Jeff, you hinted at some of the drama being removed from the wide receiver room earlier this year in variety of forms. I can remember covering the team. So I started covering the team in 2011, where the Bengals themselves moved off of Chad and T.O. and transitioned into A.J. Green and a lot of mid-round picks, young guys, all that sort of thing. It kind of feels, not to the same degree, I guess, but there's a little bit of a similarity there that I'm reading with Cooper now in there, big name guy, first round pick, good player. And then you've got, Schwartz and some draft picks and other Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's flashed here and there. This has kind of been one of the major position groups in transition for the Browns. I mean, they're set in a lot of different areas. What's everything looking like here in the wide receiver group, and with now kind of an influx quarterback situation as well?
Well, this was going to happen this year anyway. The majority of the major money of Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry was set to expire at the end of the 2021 season. So most likely major changes were coming. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he had a tremendous summer last year. And, everybody, once Odell missed the first couple of weeks and Jarvis, unfortunately kind of dinged up and never was, to be able to play like the player Jarvis Landry was, everybody just thought Donovan Peoples-Jones was going to go out and, have this incredible year for being a former 6th round pick who had 16 receptions as a rookie. Maybe that wasn't exactly, an adequate, fair road to believe that Donovan Peoples-Jones was going to travel. Certainly the inefficiency, the injuries of Baker Mayfield certainly did not help Donovan Peoples-Jones in any way whatsoever. There was some time miss. He got hurt before Thursday night game against the Denver Broncos. But he looks like, and even still, do I think we're talking about a player that could be, that 75, 900, 900 yards? I don't think maybe he's going to be that guy. But he's a vertical threat, as obviously the Bengal fans know. This is what he does best. It's kind of interesting with Donovan. The one thing, and he tested extremely well throughout the draft process, they never found a way to get a 3 cone on him. Donovan Peoples-Jones, the shorter routes it's just not where he excels. So there's kind of a card when you play against Donovan Peoples-Jones. You understand vertical is his thing. Now they've gone the other route. You bring in a tremendous player in Anthony Schwartz coming out of Auburn, missed a bunch of time as a rookie, but short, quick, deep speed. This type of player can do those type of things. David Bell has been a fantastic acquisition as a 3rd round pick to this point. There is literally like Browns beat reporters trying to find at least one drop pass, even in just like a meaningless standstill drill to this point. And nobody has it. Didn't test as an elite athlete during the draft process. But 90 receptions last year, that was more production than guys who got drafted above him had their entire college career, not just their final year in college. David Bell seems to be a player that they seem really, really high on, does the dirty work, can run the underneath routes, the stuff you're looking for, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 6 to move the chains. And Amari Cooper, it's just a very unassuming guy, not very much of a social media presence. Just going to come in, and for him now, gotten himself in a position where Dallas, there was a lot of talented guys. And for the Browns, it was, well, I can get him for a 5th round pick. We're going to convert most of that money to a signing bonus anyway, so it's not really going to affect our cap. Yeah, this is a guy to come in here, and it might be the perfect type of receiver who brings the same type of skill set, the same type of production expectations, but nothing that you got from an Odell Beckham Jr. or a Jarvis Landry. And this should bode well if and when Deshaun Watson gets to take a snap for the Browns, or with a player like Jacoby Brissett, who it's going to have to be a team effort to get success done. It's not going to be, I'm the quarterback, I threw it, you should have been there, that type of thing. Everybody's going to have to be lockstep for this passing game to work until Deshaun comes back.
Yeah, we need to find out if Amari Cooper also has a dad who's on Instagram, just to be safe.
Likes to post videos. The wrong way too.
Talking to Jeff Lloyd, who covers the Browns exquisitely on Locked On Browns. Check that out wherever you get your podcast. Jeff, you mentioned the defense earlier, very strategically, I might add, because you left out one position group that has been a talking point for the Browns in at least this past year. It is a really stacked defense everywhere else except defensive tackle. And I'm honestly just really curious as to what that plan has been like in terms of like a roster construction point. Like, what are the names that Browns fans are going to be counting on this year to, I guess, develop? Because unfortunately, it seems like it's just a bunch of young guys and a lot of question marks.
I think the one player, as far as somebody to maybe looking to step up in that room, it's got to be Tommy Togiai. He came with a lot of promise out of Ohio State. I think at the time everybody was kind of surprised when he did declare out of Ohio State. Everybody kind of thought maybe look, there's a lot of guys on that defense. Maybe you needed to stick around for one more year to maybe become the man, and that's something most players need to do within college, because it's not usually something that develops within the NFL. Played sparingly as a rookie. There were some bright spots. But the Browns, this is a team that is predicated on speed and getting athletes on the field. Joe Woods would, if he could, and they would probably let him, he would play probably nickel as his base defense. The Browns, they're like, well, we'll get you linebackers that can play like safeties. That's why we got you Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. They want to play the speed game. Will it be times where it's going to hurt them as far as short yardage situations if a player like Tommy Togiai doesn't step up? Yeah, it is. But I think what they're also thinking is the way we've constructed this offense based on Deshaun Watson being our quarterback for the foreseeable future, we're going to be in a lot more high-scoring games. So it shouldn't come down to a 3rd and 1 here or a 4th and goal here, because I think with their eyes, they're going to start playing games more similar to what we saw of the Bills and the Chiefs in the playoffs last year, where our offense is going to put up a ton of points. And if that's going to be the case and we feel we're going to be a winning team, we're going to be in the position where we can play nickel and dime a lot, where we're going to have to play nickel and dime a lot, because we're going to be playing with the lead and teams are going to be trying to chase us. Do I think they are done in that room? Maybe not. I don't think they're done. And this is, I've been guilty of this. So many people that cover the Browns have been guilty of this, trying to find this 325-pound, this 330-pound. Who's the guy that is, basically the brick wall there in these situations? I'm done. I'm done trying to do this, because obviously it's not something they are looking necessarily to do. Do I think they're done in that room yet? I probably don't think they're done in that room yet, but I don't think the name at the end of the day is all of a sudden going to say, that's it. The Browns all of a sudden address the defensive tackle room. After 6 years, we told everybody we've got the guy. I don't think it's going to work that way. Is somebody possibly going to come in? I think there's a good chance of that. I don't think it's going to be a ground-breaking move by any chance, though.
Jeff, I'm going to pull up and hopefully you've got a couple more minutes if you don't mind. I'm being not a nice guy and assuming that you're good on time, but if you need to jet, please let us know. This is from Browns Wire of the USA Today Network. This graphic here, the draft class here. We've talked about a couple of the the wide receivers and whatnot. I think one of the names that is intriguing there is Perrion Winfrey. I think some Bengals fans and pundits kind of picked him as a guy that maybe would have fit well with the Bengals. Obviously, the Browns had to wait a lot longer than a lot of other teams did to make some picks. But what did you make of the draft class? And you mentioned the kicker as well, Cade York. I guess we're so high on the Bengals and so high on things, everything they did, especially last year. I mean, is the Evan McPherson bug? Do you think that played any kind of impact on the Browns and seeing what a young kicker did for that team? And the Browns maybe looking at that saying, hey, we got to get a good young big leg kicker as well that can maybe win a couple of games at the last second for us.
I think the thought process with a player like York is look, we've been trying this. We've been going the veteran route. Let's bring in a younger guy, somebody that we can groom, understand there could maybe be, some hiccups coming out of the gate. But the other thing is, the Browns had a ton of draft picks, and regardless of how they finished last year, there wasn't a lot of room for draft picks to make this team. So that was also part of it. So why don't you use a pick on a guy that is going to be a part of the team in 2022? Perrion Winfrey certainly is going to have his opportunities, but Perrion Winfrey, the one thing you saw of him at Oklahoma and the style that he played, he was much more of a player that could assist in pass rush. I think the Browns obviously are hoping for more out of him, that quick first step, the ability to basically drive through a gap between a center and a guard can translate into helping with the run defense. The two of the picks that get me really, really excited are Alex Wright out of UAB and Isaiah Thomas out of Oklahoma State. Alex Wright never truly got to test, so we don't have much on him. The tape at UAB showed well. Isaiah Thomas tested really, really well. Both guys, 6'5", 270. Hey, guess what? Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, 6'5", 270. Size, athleticism, both these players bring that. I think Isaiah Thomas, even though he was drafted much later, might be the guy who could contribute a little bit more early, just due to the fact that Isaiah Thomas played better competition. He's more disciplined in the role as far as setting the edge, things you would expect, from a second defensive end in, 1st and 10, those type of situations. Jerome Ford is interesting because Jerome Ford, if you watch some of Cincinnati tape, you kind of get some Nick Chubb vibes, because he was just one guy and you would see open yardage and it would be nothing special. It would be 110 miles an hour towards the open hole, and somebody there tried to juke him. So he was a solid player at Cincinnati in that respect. I mean, it's going to be interesting how it works, because the Browns will have Nick Chubb, they will have Kareem Hunt, they have Dearness Johnson, they have Jerome Ford, they have Demetri Felton, all these running backs going to camp. I don't know how it's going to work that they're going to be able to keep all of them, because even if you say Felton, oh, well, he plays some wide receiver, that's a deep room over there as well now, with some of the moves that were made within the draft So it's certainly interesting how it plays out. Winfrey, and the thing that you kind of like about Perry on Winfrey is he's got like the WWE attitude to him right now. He's the talker. He's got that type of style to him. He's ready to go. You really hope it pans out. Otherwise, there's going to be a guy flapping his gums and nothing really comes out of it. And the thing with Martin Emerson is, with Martin Emerson, their first selection, and keep in mind, the Browns moved out of the second round all the way into the third round to make their first selection. Denzel Ward, as much as he's a great cornerback, he's a little bit more on the smaller side. So when Denzel Ward tries to get physical, it sometimes ends up to Denzel Ward missing a little time. Martin Emerson is a guy that probably at some point in his career would end up at the safety position. He gets his nose dirty, loves to be physical, whether it's within coverage, whether it's within, trying to fight off blocking, whether it's in run support. He's a fun player. And to think, for the Browns, the first selection they made in this draft is the guy right now who's coming into camp as their 5th cornerback. Whatever you want to say about this team last year and the failures they had on the field, the roster is good. There is a lot of solid players on this team. Got to make it translate, though.
That's true. Jeff, final question from me to you would be, I guess, it's obviously rare for a quarterback of Watson's caliber to be moved and to change teams in the prime of his career. It's just that, like, when I think of the Browns, like, they're always synonymous for a lot of cap space and, unfortunately, questions at the quarterback. Beyond this year, both those things are the complete opposite, right? So now you have an elite quarterback in Watson, who will presumably he will play in Cleveland at some point, and then you're looking at next year, you're tied up against the cap, and it's just like that's a huge contract to kind of deal with. I guess from your perspective, now that you have that, there's the quarterback there, and like the team is in complete win now mode, and there's no more stacking assets and having all this cap space. How's that like transition, I guess, been for you, and maybe for some other Browns fans that you kind of know?
Well, it is interesting. The fact that this is now a team where we're talking about a whole bunch of high-priced players. But keep in mind, when you're talking about Denzel Ward, when you're talking about Nick Chubb, when you're talking about Myles Garrett, these are their players. So it's not like they went out, brought in these free agents who are now high-priced free agents. And first thing you're going to look at, though, next year, Myles Garrett goes into year 2 of his contract extension. Next year, Nick Chubb goes into year 2 of his contract extension. So guess what? They're going to make $1 million, and everything else there is going to be turned into signing bonuses. You're going to start going the way of the New Orleans Saints, the old kick it down the road type of thing, because they're going to have to do a lot of that. And this will depend. And this is where it kind of does get tricky with Deshaun Watson, because Deshaun Watson is on the cap for 2022 at $10 million. If it comes out and Deshaun Watson were suspended for all of 2022, guess what? Deshaun Watson is on the cap for 2023 at $10 million. So it would be the same deal, which all of a sudden would put the Browns in a big, solid financial situation as far as having extra money in 2023. It's certainly, different for the way it has worked out. But, part of that is on, the past regimes. You brought in good players, and you did enough. And, you did just enough with 2018, with 2020 to find a way for these players to want to commit and stick to Cleveland. And I think that's kind of a testament to what's gone on here, as opposed to some other things. With the season falling apart last year, Nick Chubb stayed, got extended. Wyatt Teller got extended. Joe Bitonio signed yet another contract extension. You were able to just get Denzel Ward extended, after the 2021 season was over. these players still believe. They still have a tremendous belief in what is going on. Granted, for some of these players, they didn't see much early in their career, so maybe finally seeing a sign of something positive, something that looks like it's sustainable, was enough. But I mean, credit to them. A lot of these players could have said, look, after 1 year good, 1 year bad, 1 year good, 1 year bad, maybe I'll go somewhere else, or I'm looking to get out. But for all intents and purposes, all these players seem to be satisfied being here.
I'm going to quickly piggyback off that to wrap up, and then definitely want you to tell us about your show, Jeff. I guess expectations for this year, and that's kind of a good way to, I guess, wrap it in a way. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Watson because of how many games he will or won't miss. Let's just say he kind of plays half the season. What's the expectations for the Browns, given that their roster is deep in a lot of different spots, with or without their starting quarterback in tow? What are your expectations for this year? And if it is a missed season, are they still committed to Stefanski and the whole group here? If it's just kind of a little bit of a short-term loss with this season.
See, for me, and I'll start here with that. You cannot look at this season, and if Deshaun Watson ends up missing a critical amount of time, if all the time of the 2022 season, I don't know how you tell Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski they're done. Yeah, this is maybe a move they were interested in, but there is not a general manager in the NFL that can give away $238 million guaranteed without his owner saying, all right, let's go. You're not going to be able to give away 3 first-round picks without ownership signing off. So I don't know how, look, if it's really, really bad, maybe Kevin Stefanski could be in the hot seat. But, this was a move obviously everybody was on board with. And if anybody is surprised that Deshaun Watson's going to see some sort of, significant suspension time, I don't believe anybody in that room is that naive. I don't believe anybody within those rooms is that foolish, except for maybe possibly an owner at times. But as far as the expectations, look, I mean, we're talking about a really, really solid defense. And yes, we can say, oh, well, defensive tackle doesn't look that great. That's fine. The Browns can play, go 7, 8, 9 deep at the defensive back. You have a player like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who just started to scratch the surface last year. One of these players who is built like a safety, runs like a safety, and can play linebacker. They can get to a point with Chase Winovich, with Jadeveon Clowney, with Myles Garrett, with one of the 2 rookies, where they can go NASCAR package anytime they choose and run a bunch of freakish athletes as pass rushers. I think wild card is regardless of who the quarterback of this team is, wild card should be a solid and significant goal for this team. You look within the AFC North, obviously, Cincinnati for right now, riding the high. But you look at, Pittsburgh. Look, I mean, everybody just assumes Kenny Pickett is going to come in and do what Ben Roethlisberger did for 17 years. Kenny Pickett grew up 20 minutes from me. God bless him. I hope he has a great NFL career, but we can't assume any of that. Then you also look at the Ravens, and whatever anybody wants to say about the Ravens, it's really, really strange that Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson, at the stages of their career, are right now sitting here in the same contractual spot. To say that that's going on right now, and look, the Ravens could say, oh, well, Lamar can sign his deal at any time he wants. Has anybody ever known anybody to not say, oh, sure, I'll sign the $250 to $300 million contract? I mean, until that that there is a future there beyond 2022 for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, it's kind of hard to believe that 2022 will go any better than 2021. Yes, the AFC is loaded. We'll see how it plays out. The Browns do get to play the Jets. We'll see where the Dolphins are at, those type of teams, as they get, the AFC East, just like the Bengals do. But I think this is a team that is built to contend either way. I mean, are the aspirations and the goals higher for the more Deshaun Watson can play? There's no question about it. But if you're telling me that you can get Jacoby Brissett to do some of the good that Baker Mayfield did last year and just avoid the 2, 3, 4 interceptions on Christmas Day against the Green Bay Packers, a game even with 4 interceptions, they probably still could have won 2 or 3 different times. If you can just get him to play within himself, play within the system, hit the wide open play action throws that are going to be there, this is a team that should certainly win more games than they're going to lose.
He's Jeff Lloyd of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm going to pull up the website here, obviously available on your favorite audio streamers and multiple platforms. Jeff, tell us a little bit about your show, obviously where people can find it, where they can find you and your work, all of it.
Well, I've been hosting Locked On Browns since the fall of 2017. Still had many people questioning, my mental sanity at the time as I signed up to host a 0-6 football team. Then, 2018 came around. The team, obviously the entire state and thought process of the Cleveland Browns changed tremendously. The joys of 2020. Every podcast, where you get your favorite podcast, Locked On Browns available. Over the last 6 weeks, we have ventured into the YouTube area. Digital streaming. Everybody, this seems to be the way to go here now. We finally have, after almost 5+ years, added a co-host in Garrett Bush. Entrenched in Cleveland, works for 92.3, The Fan in Cleveland, part of the Older Cleveland Sports Show, and it's really it's taken off to this point. And it's for me, it's different because now I'm a little bit more of maybe the analyst of the show as I was always the host of the Locked On Browns podcast. But the growth of the show, the reception for everything that we're doing, it's just been tremendous to this point. Certainly looking forward to trips out to Ohio this football season. So it's been a hell of a ride, to this point, and just seeing basically getting it to one place and then finding a way to get it even bigger to where it is. I can be followed at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd, at Locked On Browns for the podcast. On social medias, wherever you get your podcasts, of course we're available there, and of course on YouTube. It's been a hell of a ride. And I think the thing with the Browns is it's been such an apples and oranges type of thing the last few years. 18 great, 19 not so much, 20, which is essentially a Super Bowl season if you're a Cleveland Brown fan, and then all that going into 2021, and here comes the heartbreak again. If anything, for Browns fans, if you're going by the up 1 year, down 1 year, 2022 looks like it should be pretty positive.
We'll see. We will definitely see. But thank you for your time, Jeff. We definitely appreciate it. Go check out the Locked On Browns podcast, and appreciate all your time. I know we took a lot of it, but this was awesome. And thank you for educating us on all things Browns this season. And go check out the podcast, everybody. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.